With the 20th general election just around the corner, there's a special exhibition here at the National Museum of Korea's Contemporary History in downtown Seoul. It gives us a visual tour of the footsteps of Korea's election system. From the very first election in 1948, Korea's election system went through tumultuous times, from representative elections to rigged elections to now free and direct elections. Therefore, the history of elections here in Korea also represents the history of democracy in the Republic of Korea. Now, from that very first vote 68 years ago, Korea's election system and Korea's democracy have matured to now even embrace the right to vote for Korean nationals living overseas as well.
The National Election Commission of the Republic of Korea. Voting day for the 20th National Assembly election may be roughly 3 weeks away on April 13th for Koreans living in this country. But for Korean nationals living overseas, it begins in less than a week from today. Overseas voting system gives Korean nationals living in different parts of the world the right to express their voice in homeland politics.
The overseas voting system was introduced in 2009. And the practice of overseas voting was conducted in two elections, National Assembly election and presidential election in 2012.
While the number of eligible voters abroad, it stands at roughly 2 million. Voter registration and turnout rates have been rather disappointing in the last two elections where overseas voting was practiced. Out of the small number registered, those who actually showed up to cast their ballots during the voting period have been even more mediocre. Voter turnout during the 2012 general election came at just above 45%, and the presidential race roughly 70%. For the National Assembly election this year, voter registration tallied at 7.8%, or 154,000 of some 1.98 million eligible electorates.
Have there been measures taken by the National Election Commission to improve the convenience, to better the convenience for these overseas voters to come out and really exercise their right to vote?
According to division of the election law, the overseas voters could register on website of National Election Commission of the Republic of Korea easily by themselves. And we put on another polling station in the district that is far from Korean embassy. We expend the a lot of money for overseas voting, and some people criticize why we expend a lot of money for overseas voting. The people don't pay taxes, and the low the participation, but we respect the right to vote. Either the people live in inside Korea or abroad.
All right,
well, as the saying goes, patriotism begins in the voting booth, and for all eligible Korean voters living overseas, it's an opportunity to start taking part in Korean politics and to keep in touch with homeland. Now, with less than a week left until overseas Koreans begin to cast ballots to elect the nation's members of parliament, Korean embassies and missions in major cities around the world are busy with last-minute efforts to encourage voters to come out and vote. We connect with the electoral attachés at the Republic of Korea missions in Japan and the United States, countries with some of the largest population of overseas Koreans. Counselors, thank you for speaking with us tonight. You now have less than a week left to gear up for the big day. How are preparations going? Well, first, Councillor Kim in Tokyo, and then we'll head over to Councillor Yoon in Los Angeles in that order, please.
Our embassy has two main tasks left for the remaining days: letting more overseas Koreans know of the voting system where their respective polling booths are located, and reminding them to come out and vote. As candidate lists become finalized, we will continue to roll out reminders on various Korean-Japanese newspapers, such as the Mindan Shinbun, One Korea Daily News, and online communities for Korean students and mums living here in Japan.
I think we need to now focus on last-minute promotions to encourage more voters to come out and cast their ballots, as well as making sure all goes as planned during the voting period. With a change in the election law this time around, we have added 2 additional polling stations in the LA district, one in Orange County and another in San Diego County. For the next couple of days, we plan to make sure those new polling locations are all set and ready to go.
Well, I'm sure these couple of days leading up to the actual voting period will not only be the busiest time for all of our diplomatic missions across the globe, but a very critical time as well. Now, with only a few days left, what is the mood there like on the ground? This time again, we'll go with Tokyo first and then LA. Councillors.
I can't say that the election participation mood here in Japan is all that positive. That's because the overall number of Korean nationals in Japan dropped by half, as many students and expats returned to Korea after the March 11th Great East Japan earthquake in 2011. Another factor is a general belief among some Koreans here who took part in the first overseas voting in the 2012 parliamentary election, that elections at home don't necessarily bring direct benefits to Koreans living abroad. However, we do believe more eligible voters will participate in next year's presidential election. I think what we need to do from here on is to come up with various ways to improve the current system so that overseas voting can become more convenient and accessible for Koreans living overseas.
As for here in the United States, election mood seems to be building up as the overall interest in politics and elections are high, with the primaries for the U.S. presidential election underway as well. Compared to the 2012 general election, 3,600 more Koreans have registered to vote, although compared to the presidential race, the number is smaller by 3,200. The registration rate during the 2012 general election was 2.3%, but the rate this time is double that at 5%. One of the biggest inconveniences that voters in the U.S. experience is the long distance to the polling stations. For instance, for Korean voters living in Las Vegas or Phoenix to cast their ballots, they would have to drive 6-7 hours to get to the Consul General's office here in L.A. That is a huge discouragement for them.
Well, I'm sure more improvements will be made as we carry out more overseas votings for the upcoming presidential election and many more elections to come. Thank you both for speaking with us tonight. All of us here in Korea wish you all the best in successfully carrying out Korea's 20th legislative elections in your respective countries. That was Korea's electoral attachés in Tokyo and Los Angeles, 2 cities with some of the largest eligible voters Korea's population. Now, for all Koreans watching Arirang News Center from abroad, let me remind you again, voting for overseas Koreans kicks off next Wednesday, March 30th, for 6 days up until April 4th at 198 polling stations across the globe. Voting is a right, exercise your right, and have a say in your homeland politics.